That's just my big sister. We have a special bond.
The Pelicans would make Zion Williamson available ahead of trying to get into that top end of the draft.
The Pelicans are among teams seriously pursuing that #2 overall pick.
This latest Zion Williamson update is very heavy and very crazy, and as a result of some of the recent moves that the New Orleans Pelicans have made, we already know what Zion Williamson's future is going to look like. We have multiple sources attesting to the fact, and the info we have for you in this video is crazy. Before we get to the content, I want to apologize to you guys. This should have been up way sooner. Unfortunately, Spectrum shot the bed for me. We had an internet outage, and today I was just scurrying all throughout Los Angeles looking for internet that would allow me to upload and download my content. So I apologize, man. I really tried my best to get out what I could. Of course, we're still running a $1,000 giveaway and announcing giveaway winners on the very first day of free agency for any subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. Now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. The NFL and NBA season are officially over, and I need something to hold me over until at least the NFL season comes back. So I've been playing prize picks for the WNBA and the MLB, and I've been fairly successful. It's a good way to get some extra action on games that I wouldn't really watch otherwise. I post my picks onto my Instagram story daily, and I've been hitting on a decent amount of them. And right now, when you use my promo code microphone, they'll double your deposit up to $100. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? About a week ago, we got a very big update on Zion Williamson's personal life. You see, he had announced that he was going to have a daughter with his lovely girlfriend, acquaintance, human that he engaged in relations with, a woman whose Instagram is @ConcreteRose. We had no idea who this woman was. All we knew was her and Zion Williamson were having a child together. Things were looking good until Zion said this during the gender reveal.
I don't know what the future holds, but mommy and daddy love you. Don't know nothing else in this world. Know that mommy and daddy love you.
Which definitely caused us to raise some eyebrows, and it wasn't until a woman by the name of Mariah Mills went on a huge Twitter rampage that we started to actually pay attention to the story. Now, the story gets crazy, and we covered it in depth already. If you guys missed it, I highly recommend you watch it with tremendous discretion, especially if you happen to click the photos button when you search Mariah Mills' name on Twitter. Good God almighty, I don't know how humans are doing this to themselves via plastic surgery. And to be honest, I don't know how men are going so crazy over these damn BBLs. But who am I to judge? Originally, I planned on not diving too deep into this, but since it's a trending story and this is a video on Zion Williamson, I figured we'd bring you this update as well. Mariah Mills is still on her clout-chasing crusade, tweeting things like, "You'll never bounce back, Zion. It's over for you. Why are you renting a house in Miami? At Zion. You won't be able to sleep. Sleepless nights, it's over for you," with a bunch of emojis. "You effed up spitting in my mouth all those times at Zion Williamson. It's over for you. I own you." Probably the most popular one is, "Your NBA career light will be dimmed once the tapes release at Zion Williamson. It's over for you." Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we actually tweeted this out yesterday. Mariah Mills is threatening to release tapes of her and Zion Williamson, tweeting out that, "NBA, I have tapes of me and Zion Williamson," and he also has them on his trap phone at NBA, at Pelicans NBA, trade him now. He doesn't deserve to be in New Orleans. Tapes dropping soon. My initial reaction is, this is not how I expected Zion Williamson's career to be going. You don't need to be some sort of female genius or Riz god like Shams Charania to understand what's going on here. Mariah Mills' tweets are getting a lot of views, so she's tweeting out as much nonsense as she possibly can to squeeze this cloud orange as much as she could, get as many views as she can, and hopefully redirect some of that traffic to her website. Does she have tapes or not? I don't know. There's definitely a good chance that the reason why Zion was paying her $107,000 a month was to get her not to drop said tape. But at the same time, if she's acting this way now that Zion cut her off, don't you think that she would have dropped said tapes on her website to try to funnel more traffic into the website and gain more subscribers? So I'm not necessarily sure. All I can say before we jump into the important part of this video, including what Zion's future is going to look like, what team he's going to potentially get traded to, the new team that's entering the race, and a brand new superstar dynamic duo that could potentially be formed, is the fact that if you're a star player in the NBA, you really need to watch for who you're messing around with. These women act hella sweet at first, especially when they know you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And once they have the upper hand on you and they could siphon money from you, this is how they act. Which is why I'm a huge proponent for NBA stars marrying their high school sweethearts, or like finding their woman before they make it into the NBA. Because once they see what's out there, man, once they find out that you're famous, once they find out that you make millions of dollars, this is the type of women you end up attracting. Like LeVar said to LaMelo Ball, you're never gonna have a good woman in your life, because all the women that are gonna come towards you are hoes that just want your money and the lifestyle that comes with you. And he was right. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is it seems like it wasn't just us who was snooping into Zion Williamson's personal life that became relatively public. No, the New Orleans Pelicans were paying attention to this too. You see, throughout the duration of Zion Williamson's Pelicans tenure, you have to admit, the New Orleans Pelicans did a remarkable job surrounding him with talent. When he was drafted, he was already placed on a team with Lonzo Ball, himself, Brandon Ingram, JJ Redick, had a state-of-the-art coaching staff. Yes, maybe not Alvin Gentry, but they quite literally had a shot guru that remade Lonzo Ball's jump shot. Drew Holiday was still on the team back then, and the team was loaded with a tremendous amount of assets for the future. Zion Williamson was in the perfect situation to contend. And although the New Orleans Pelicans weren't as large of a market as the New York Knicks, you have to admit that LeBron James would have done ungodly things to be in a situation like this when the Cleveland Cavaliers selected him with the #1 pick in the 2003 NBA draft. Why am I drawing this parallel? Because, well, Zion Williamson was supposed to be the greatest NBA prospect since LeBron James. But through it all, there's a lot of frustration throughout Zion Williamson's tenure. For one, the fact that he was getting injured quite consistently, and the New Orleans Pelicans were being very conservative with playing him. They didn't want to risk losing Zion Williamson and ruining him for the duration of his career because he was over 260 pounds on a 6'7" frame, was putting way too much pressure and weight on his knees, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, one of the greatest athletic specimens in NBA history turns out to have a career very similar to what DeMarcus Cousins has now. So the answer to this was Zion had to drop weight. That became the next storyline in Zion Williamson's career. Through it all, the New Orleans Pelicans were making moves. They traded for CJ McCollum, they traded for Jonas Valanciunas, they somehow added more draft capital, they were nailing their picks. I mean, Herb Jones is a stud, CJ McCollum is a dependent scorer, they moved on from Drew Holiday, Brandon Ingram was becoming a consistent scorer and one of the leaders for the New Orleans Pelicans. This team had a lot of promise. They just needed Zion Williamson to show up, and they were ready. They proved this during the first round of the 2022 NBA playoffs versus the Phoenix Suns, where they were very scrappy and very competitive. But that's the problem. Zion never really played. Through it all, there were questions about how much Zion truly wanted to be with the Pelicans. And although you could say these types of things in the media as a result of him gaining weight and as a result of him being unavailable, I like to say actions speak louder than words. But Zion Williamson's actions were indicating as such. For example, he never welcomed CJ McCollum to the team when CJ McCollum was traded to the Pelicans, which was a great trade, by the way. It was practically highway robbery. JJ Redick, his ex-teammate, who is now a sports analyst that gives hot takes, called him out for it.
And look, I was his teammate. I can describe him as a detached teammate.
The worst part of all was when Zion was playing, the Pelicans were one of the most competitive teams in the NBA. When Zion Williamson was playing, he lived up to the hype. I don't think you guys understand how insane it is for a player to play in 24 games in his rookie season and then come back in his sophomore season and from game 25 start dominating the NBA. And in the 61 games that Zion played in his sophomore season, he dropped 27 points per game off of 61% shooting. He was as good as advertised, and this is a Zion Williamson that was just 20 years old. However, the very next year, suffered a foot injury. He had no idea where this came from, but he missed the entire 2021 to 2022 season as the Pelicans strung fans along, thinking that Zion Williamson's return was going to be very soon. He only played in 29 games this past year. In those 29 games, it was more of the same. His age 22 season, he averaged 26 points per game off of 61% 37% from the field. He averaged a steal per game and 7 rebounds per game as well. And when he was on the court, the Pelicans were one of the top 3 teams in the Western Conference, right next to the Memphis Grizzlies. Unfortunately, this would not come to last. Why am I telling you all this now? Well, the Pelicans appear to be fed up with Zion Williamson. They might be ready to move on. And this was at first supposed to be a very cute trade, you know, like you're just throwing it out saying, hey, you know, this makes a lot of sense. The Pelicans could be down to move on from Zion Williamson. But then you had Shams Charania saying this.
To aggressively pursue a top pick, potentially 2 or 3. Henderson and Alabama's Brandon Miller are vying to potentially go number 2 to the Charlotte Hornets in the draft, but the Pelicans are among teams seriously pursuing that number 2 overall pick.
Very shortly after, you had Mark Stein saying that a well-placed source thinks the Pelicans would indeed consider dealing Zion Williamson to move into the top 3 and draft Scoot Henderson. At that point, I'm like, okay, maybe Mark Stein is just trying to hop on a trending topic. Then Brian Windhorst, the king of last offseason, the man that gave us this beautiful meme, which we're about to show you the applicability here in just a sec, said that Zion Williamson has no relationship with the New Orleans Pelicans amidst trade rumors. Man, things are getting really heated. Wendy said this on the Hoop Collective podcast. There's minimal relationship between Zion and his teammates. This is 2.5 sources suggesting that Zion Williamson could be on the move. Shams kind of hinted towards the Pelicans wanting to trade for Scoot Henderson, so I'm counting him as half a source. And then we found out some news that was very, very significant. Some news that should have been made a bigger deal. You see, there's a NBA legend that Zion Williamson was very close with. Incredibly close with. Got him through the very difficult first couple years in the NBA. Her name was Teresa Witherspoon. As a matter of fact, this is how close her and Zion Williamson are.
Last season, where I was leaving the arena, and she asked me, am I all right? Usually I just brush it off like, yeah, I'm straight. I'm just going home. But I just trust Teaspoon so much with like opening up. No, I'm not. I am not okay. Her first response wasn't words. Cried for me. He literally just cried for me, and I remember trying to take that moment and like, I have somebody special in my corner. She really does care about me, and the feeling is mutual. That's my big sister. She was there. She stayed connected with me through the off season. That's just my big sister. We have a special bond.
Now, why is this significant? Because just a few days ago, we found out from Shams Charania that the Pelicans are parting ways with assistant coach, Basketball Hall of Famer Teresa Witherspoon. Witherspoon has been on the staff since 2020, developing a strong rapport with players like Zion Williamson, and turned down other opportunities in hopes of rising in New Orleans. Now you can see why the Brian Windhorst meme comes into play. Why would the Pelicans do that? They are trying to trade into the top 3. Well, very shortly after, Zion would meet with David Griffin, possibly in regards to this. And I have to give props to David Griffin, man. He was as patient as can be. He built this team beautifully around Zion Williamson. I have to admit, yes, he didn't necessarily have the greatest luck with head coaching, with Alvin Gentry, and then Stan Van Gundy, and now Willie Green. And I honestly think Willie Green could be the guy. But in terms of acquisition of talent, I think David Griffin did a hell of a job. Now, in our last video, we discussed how the Pelicans are considering the possibility of dealing Zion Williamson to the Charlotte Hornets for the number 2 pick. Based on what I'm hearing, yes, the Pelicans are legitimately considering it. It doesn't mean they would 100% do it, but they are considering the prospect of trying to assemble a deal for Charlotte's number 2 pick that would feature Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson and LaMelo Ball alley-oops would be amazing. And I really hope this happens, and Zion would have the opportunity to go back home and play literally an hour and 15 minutes away from where he grew up, which is awesome. But there's a problem. It looks like the Charlotte Hornets aren't interested in Zion. They want Brandon Ingram.
I don't know if the Hornets would want Zion Williamson. I think who the Hornets want, from what I'm told, is Brandon Ingram.
Now, I also wanted to make a note that this could all just be generating hype for Michael Jordan to sell the team right now at the peak of its value, because he did just sell the Charlotte Hornets. Maybe that's why they might have some promise moving into the future. But we got an update today, and one, it's a team that could also enter the Zion Williamson race that I mentioned in our Damian Lillard video. But I also want you to know that there's conflicting reports about this, because on one hand, you have Chris Chris Mannix from Sports Illustrated saying that the Blazers have no interest in dealing the number 3 pick, which I think is the smart thing to do in this particular instance. But at the same time, you're hearing that Blazers reportedly prefer Zion Williamson over Brandon Ingram in a trade for the number 3 overall pick. My sense from league sources is that Portland's preference is Williamson, who'd be a weapon in the pick and roll and in handoffs alongside Damian Lillard should he stick around, and Shaedon Sharpe. There's two things here, and I said this in our Damian Lillard video. On one hand, I would love to see a pick and roll with Damian Lillard and Zion Williamson, and I would love to see alley-oops from LaMelo Ball to Zion Williamson. I also think the Portland Trail Blazers have significantly more assets to give up in order to acquire Zion Williamson, and I think it makes sense in the sense that at least you're giving up the number 3 overall pick for a player that you could build around for the future moving forward, assuming he stays healthy. That's a very big assumption. You also have to understand the history of the Portland Trail Blazers. This is a team that selected Sam Bowie over Michael Jordan. Sam Bowie had injury issues throughout his career, is known as one of the great draft busts of our time due to injuries. This is a team that selected Greg Oden over Kevin Durant, and you can't really blame them because back then, Greg Oden was supposed to be the greatest center prospect since Shaquille O'Neal. You might be thinking, Mike, that's Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard didn't generate the hype that Greg Oden had. Trust me, I would know. I was around back then, and I'm sure other people that were around back then could attest to this. Dwight Howard came out of high school. Greg Oden was dominating at Ohio State. Very exciting, and unfortunately, Blazers drafted him and he never fulfilled his potential due to injuries. This is before we mentioned Brandon Roy, who had a very successful career that was cut short due to injuries. So you would think if there's any team that's cautious about potentially taking on a star player that has tremendous potential, very likely to get injured, needs to drop weight, I think the Portland Trail Blazers would be a little nervous about that. But at the same time, the Portland Trail Blazers have significantly more assets. They have Anthony Simons, they have Cam Reddish, they have Matisse Thybulle, Jeremy Grant, Yusuf Nurkic, Shaedon Sharpe, Kevin Knox, although I don't necessarily know if Kevin Knox belongs in this list, but you get what I'm saying. There's a lot of players that they could offer in a trade for Zion Williamson in addition to draft capital. Which brings us to our point here. Why would the New Orleans Pelicans entertain this? Well, according to Ian Begley, the New Orleans Pelicans have had enough of Zion Williamson. They're tired of it. They're over it. Begley says that recent off-court events surrounding Zion Williamson have shocked high-ranking members of the Pelicans organization. To be honest, I don't think that's a bold statement at all. Do you guys remember how crazy we went when we found out that Zion Williamson was paying Mariah Mills
$1 million a year annually? $107,000 a month?
Bro, if you want to follow her on OnlyFans, isn't it like $9 or $20 or $30 or $40 or $50 a month? I'm not an OnlyFans person, and if you are, then you're down terrible. I'm sorry, I'm calling your out. You're down terrible. Get off of that trash website and actually go pursue women if you're on OnlyFans.
I'm serious!
But even if you are, what are you doing paying $107,000 a month to an OnlyFans model? Bro, this is like those stories you hear about those like 6-year-old kids that spend like $120,000 on those mobile games, buying like extras in those mobile games with in-app purchases. This is like one of those stories. So I believe it when they say that high-ranking members of the Pelicans organization have been shocked by this news. Because we're shocked by this news. Could you imagine the look on David Griffin's face when he found out that Zion Williamson is paying Mariah Mills $107,000 a month? He probably looked at it, he's like,
I can't build a team around this guy. We gotta move on from him. This is not it. This is not our guy.
Now check this out. High-ranking members of the organization have been dismayed by recent off-court developments around Zion Williamson. As other outlets have noted, the organization recently fired assistant coach Teresa Witherspoon, a Naismith Hall of Famer who was instrumental in the development of several young Pelicans, including Williamson. Those reading the tea leaves may surmise that Witherspoon's firing was related to the team's issues with Zion Williamson. At the end of the day, in my opinion, you have to look at this for what it is. Could Zion Williamson come out of nowhere and become a superstar? Yeah. The only other player I could think of in this situation that it panned out for is Joel Embiid. People tend to forget. Joel Embiid had a lot of trouble staying on the court during the first couple of years of his career. Way worse than Zion Williamson, by the way. I mean, you're talking about a player that quite literally missed the first 2 seasons of his career and then played in 31 games in the 3rd season of his career. And even to this day, he still plays about like 63-ish games per year. And it's awesome when he does, and I think the Sixers did a remarkable job handling that situation. But that's Joel Embiid. That's one success story. How do you know Zion Williamson isn't the next Greg Oden? If he is, well, there's a chance that you could trade him and get Scoot Henderson instead. I don't necessarily think you need Zion Williamson to be contenders in the West. It'd be nice, but it seems like he's not realizing the opportunity that is being given to him. I legitimately think the Pelicans are a top 3 team in the West when Zion Williamson's on the court. It doesn't seem like he cares though. So if that is the case, what do you have to lose? Why would you keep him at this point? Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this situation. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike.
And if you subscribe to Women on OnlyFans, unsub from this channel.
And I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.